2,000 pounds of forged steel and tritonal high explosive slams into the 170-meter angled flight deck at just under the speed of sound. The target is a 42,000-ton behemoth, roughly the physical size of a World War II aircraft carrier. But underneath the newly welded runway, this is not a warship. It is a commercial container vessel packed with aviation fuel, solid rocket motors, and dozens of heavily armed combat drones. When the delayed fuse warhead breaches the flight deck and detonates deep inside the cargo hold, it does not just blow a hole in the ship. It triggers a catastrophic, uncontrollable chain reaction. Within minutes, the flagship of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy is consumed by a chemical fire that melts its structural framing, dooming the vessel to the bottom of the ocean. How does a military force systematically dismantle a 42,000-ton floating drone base? What are the exact physical limitations of converting a civilian cargo ship into an instrument of war? And why is commercial-grade steel fundamentally incapable of surviving military-grade kinetic energy? We are going to examine the destruction of the IRIS Shahid Bagheri during the opening hours of Operation Epic Fury in late February 2026. We will break down the naval architecture of the vessel, the physics of a penetrating warhead detonating inside a cavernous commercial hold, the horrific reality of lithium-ion battery fires at sea, and the ruthless mathematics of a catastrophic structural collapse. This is the unvarnished engineering reality of sinking a modern drone carrier. To understand why the IRIS Shahid Bagheri was destroyed so rapidly, you must first examine how it was built. The vessel did not begin its life in a military shipyard. It was originally laid down as a commercial container ship, the Parison, designed to haul standard 20-foot shipping containers across the globe. In a bid to rapidly project asymmetric naval power and extend the reach of their Shah drone fleets, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy initiated a massive retrofit. They took the 240-meter cargo hull and fundamentally altered its geometry. They welded a 170-meter angled flight deck that extended aggressively off the port side of the ship, complete with a sky-jump ramp at the bow. This allowed the vessel to launch and recover fixed-wing unmanned aerial vehicles and rotary-wing helicopters far beyond Iran's coastal borders. On paper and in propaganda broadcasts, it looked like a supercarrier. It displaced 42,000 tons. It was painted in military gray. It carried an air wing of up to 60 drones, but naval warfare is not fought on paper. It is fought with metallurgy, compartmentalization, and damage control. And in these three critical categories, the Shahid Bagheri was fatally flawed. The first critical vulnerability is the steel itself. A United States Navy Nimitz or Ford-class aircraft carrier is constructed using high-yield steel, specifically HY80 or HY100. This is a military-grade alloy designed to flex and absorb massive amounts of kinetic energy and explosive overpressure without shattering. The hull of a commercial container ship is built using standard mild steel. It is designed to be cheap, easily welded, and capable of handling the predictable static load of shipping containers and the standard dynamic load of ocean waves. It is absolutely not designed to absorb the shockwave of a military warhead. The second and perhaps most catastrophic vulnerability is the internal architecture. A true warship relies on a principle called watertight compartmentalization. A U.S. aircraft carrier contains over 3,000 individual compartments. If the ship is hit by a torpedo or a missile, the crew sets condition zebra, slamming shut hundreds of heavy steel watertight doors. If a compartment floods, the water is trapped inside that specific, isolated steel box. The ship loses buoyancy, but it does not sink. A container ship is the exact opposite. Its primary economic value is empty internal volume. The hull is essentially a massive, cavernous warehouse designed to fit as much cargo as possible. There are very few internal bulkheads. When the Shahid Bagheri was converted, those massive cargo holds were repurposed to store drones, aviation fuel, and munitions. During the opening phase of Operation Epic Fury, American commanders identified the Shahid Bagheri as a priority Tier 1 target. As a mobile launch platform for swarm drones, it posed a severe asymmetric threat to the carrier strike groups operating in the Arabian Sea. The order was given to eliminate the vessel. The strike was not a naval artillery duel. It was a surgical execution from the sky. F-35C Lightning IIs or F-A-18 Super Hornets, launching from the deck of the USS Abraham Lincoln or the USS Gerald R. Ford, bypassed the Iranian coastal defense networks. The Shahid Bagheri, despite its size, had no advanced Aegis-style radar and no layered air defense. It was a massive, slow-moving target emitting a massive radar cross-section. The pilots employed precision-guided munitions designed specifically for hardened targets, such as the GBU-31 Joint Direct Attack Munition, equipped with a BLU-109 penetrator warhead. When a 2,000-pound BLU-109 strikes a ship, it does not detonate on contact. The weapon is wrapped in an inch-thick casing of forged steel. It utilizes sheer kinetic energy, falling from the sky at near supersonic speed, to physically punch a hole straight through the steel flight deck. A smart, delayed-action fuse in the tail of the bomb counts the milliseconds after impact. The weapon passes through the deck, enters the cavernous internal volume of the converted cargo hold, and then detonates. The physics of an internal detonation inside a commercial hull are devastating. When 900 pounds of tritonal high explosive detonates in a confined space, the explosive pressure wave expands outward at over 20,000 feet per second. In a military warship, armored bulkheads would absorb and deflect this overpressure. Inside the cavernous, unarmored hold of the Shahid Bagheri, the pressure wave hits the outer hull plates from the inside out. The standard mild steel of the commercial hull warps, shears, and ruptures. But the explosive blast is only the first phase of the kill chain. The true destroyer of the Shahid Bagheri was its own cargo. The internal holds of the drone carrier were packed with the logistical requirements for unmanned aviation. This means thousands of gallons of highly volatile aviation fuel, solid rocket propellant for the drone boosters, and critically, hundreds of high-capacity lithium-ion batteries used to power the electrical systems of the UAVs. When the JDAM detonated, the thermal flash ignited the aviation fuel, creating an instant, massive fireball that rolled through the open interior holds. But when the fire reached the drone storage racks, the situation transitioned from a severe emergency to a completely unrecoverable catastrophe. When a lithium-ion battery is subjected to extreme heat or physical trauma, it goes into a state called thermal runaway. The chemical cells collapse, releasing their own stored energy as massive amounts of heat, often exceeding 3,500 degrees Fahrenheit. More importantly, burning lithium-ion batteries produce their own oxygen as a byproduct of the chemical reaction. You cannot smother a lithium-ion fire. You cannot easily extinguish it with standard seawater or chemical foam. It burns with blinding intensity, generating toxic, highly flammable off-gases that fuel secondary explosions. Inside the Shahid Bagheri, the IRGC crew faced a literal inferno. On a United States aircraft carrier, the crew is subjected to relentless obsessive damage control training. They have automated aqueous film-forming foam, or AFFF, deluge systems built into the ceilings of the hangar bays that can bury a fire in seconds. They have dedicated damage control lockers, self-contained breathing apparatuses, and thermal imaging cameras. The crew of the Shahid Bagheri was fighting a military-grade chemical fire inside a commercial hull using standard maritime fire hoses. It was a mathematically impossible fight. At 3,500 degrees, steel does not just burn, it loses its structural integrity. At roughly 1,100 degrees Fahrenheit, structural steel loses 50% of its yield strength. As the lithium and aviation fuel fires raged unchecked through the cavernous holds of the ship, the internal support beams and load-bearing frames began to soften, warp, and buckle under the immense weight of the ship itself. This brings us to the final, fatal engineering flaw of the Shahid Bagheri, its asymmetric geometry. When the IRGC welded a 170-meter flight deck that extended aggressively off the port side of the ship, they drastically altered the vessel's center of gravity. A massive amount of steel was hanging off one side of the hull. Under normal peacetime operations, this extreme asymmetry was countered by complex computerized ballasting, pumping hundreds of tons of seawater into specific tanks on the starboard side to keep the ship level. But a ship on fire is a ship losing systems. As the internal blast destroyed the electrical routing and the intense heat melted the control lines, the ballasting pumps failed. Simultaneously, the massive volume of water being desperately pumped into the ship by the crew's fire hoses began to pool in the cavernous lower holds. This is a phenomenon known as the free surface effect. Thousands of tons of loose water sloshing back and forth inside the hull violently destabilizes the ship. Without the active ballasting to counter the immense weight of the cantilevered flight deck, and with the internal steel framing softening from the thermal runaway of the drone batteries, the physics of the vessel collapsed. The ship began to list heavily to port, pulled down by the sheer weight of its own runway. As the list increased, the sea breached the ruptured hull plates blown open by the initial internal detonation. The ocean poured into the massive cargo holds. Because the ship lacked the thousands of watertight compartments of a true warship, there was nothing to stop the massive ingress of water. The flooding accelerated exponentially. For the Iranian sailors on board, the final minutes were a chaotic, terrifying scramble for survival in a highly toxic environment. The air was thick with the poisonous black smoke of burning composites, plastic, and lithium. The deck was tilting at an extreme angle, making it impossible to walk. The lights had failed, plunging the non-burning sections of the ship into absolute darkness. The IRIS Shahid Bagheri, a 42,000-ton symbol of asymmetric naval ambition, rolled onto its port side. The massive flight deck hit the water. The structural spine of the commercial hull snapped under the sheer torsional stress, and the burning flagship of the drone fleet slid beneath the surface of the Arabian Sea. The destruction of the Shahid Bagheri during Operation Epic Fury was not a long, drawn-out naval battle. It was a swift, brutal demonstration of engineering reality. You can paint a container ship gray, you can weld a runway to its deck, and you can pack it full of combat drones. But you cannot bypass the laws of physics, metallurgy, and naval architecture. A commercial hull is built for profit, efficiency, and volume. A warship is built to absorb kinetic violence and survive. When the United States military applied advanced, penetrating kinetic violence to a commercial hull, the result was absolute and immediate structural failure. The Shahid Bagheri was designed to project power, but it was fundamentally incapable of surviving a fight. This is the grim, unvarnished truth of naval warfare. The ocean does not care about propaganda, and high explosive does not respect a modified hull. The destruction of Iran's floating drone base serves as a definitive mathematical proof that in a symmetric conflict against a peer adversary, improvised commercial warships are nothing more than massive, slow-moving targets waiting for a bomb. If this deep dive into the engineering, physics, and sheer destructive reality of the strike on the Shahid Bagheri gave you a new perspective on modern naval warfare, let me know in the comments below. Do you think the era of improvised, asymmetric drone carriers is over? Or will militaries continue to try and militarize commercial hulls? Hit the like button to help push this documentary into the algorithm, and make sure you subscribe to the channel and ring the bell for more uncensored, highly detailed looks into the machinery of war. The ocean is vast, and there are many more wrecks to analyze. Until next time, stay sharp and keep your eyes on the horizon.